Hello and welcome to NACM's 2021 Annual Conference video bonus sessions. On behalf of NACM President TJ Bement and President-elect and Conference Chair Kathy Griffin, welcome to today's session. NACM would also like to acknowledge the generous support of the State Justice Institute for their support of this and all the programs of the annual conference. We would also like to thank the Conference Development Committee for creating this educational programming for 2021. My name is Jude Del Prior. I'm a former NACM president and presently assist the association in education planning. With me today is Erin Carr, NACM Association Manager. Today's program is being pre-recorded as a bonus to both live and virtual conference attendees. Our presenters have provided their contact information that will be uploaded and posted with this video in the event you have any questions after viewing. Today's session is the Pathway and Plan to Inclusion. In this session, you will learn the value of inclusion for judges and staff, court users, and the public, and you will learn how to create a pathway and plan to inclusion and justice for all. Our presenters today have very impressive bios. I'm going to highlight some of the key events, but their entire bios will be posted to the NACM conference website. This morning we have with us Judge Mariam S. Bazzi. Judge Bazzi was appointed to the bench in May of 2017 after serving as an assistant Wayne County prosecutor for over 11 years. She currently serves in the criminal division, where she oversees a mental health court docket in addition to her regular duties. She also serves on the Court Executive Committee and on the Strategic Planning Team, where she is the judicial sponsor of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. During her service at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, she prosecuted hundreds of criminal cases, including violent crimes, drug cases, financial crimes, and other complex and high-profile cases. Judge Bazzi has been active in many community and civic organizations, including the American Political Action Committee, where she served as the president from 2010 to 2014. Judge Bazzi holds a JD from Wayne State University and a BS in political science from the University of Michigan, Dearborn. With Judge Bazzi this morning is our own Zenell Brown. Zenell currently serves as the Executive Court Administrator of the Third Circuit Court. She's an attorney, mediation trainer, certified diversity professional. She is co-author of an approved mediation training curriculum and recent author of Coffee and Conversations, Inclusion and Belonging. Zenell is a multi-talented court leader. She has spearheaded and contributed to the reimagining, strategic planning, and transformation of court operations. Results include launching self-help centers, amnesty programs, and holistic juvenile services. Zenell serves on the board of the Detroit Bar Association, the board of the Michigan Diversity Council, several committees of our National Association of Court Management, and the faculty of Michigan Judicial Institute and the faculty of the Institute of Court Management. A forever learner, Zenell holds a Juris Doctorate from Wayne State University Law School, graduate certificate public administration from Central Michigan University, and judicial administration certificate from Michigan State University. Zenell, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jude, and thank you for having me, NACM, present virtually. Couldn't be there in California, but I'm so glad to be here today. And Judge Bazzi and I are just going to share with you a little bit about what we did in our court as far as finding our pathway and then deciding what we would do to make diversity and inclusion right for us. And first of all, just some introductory points that we needed to touch on. Diversity and inclusion is so much more than gender and race. Oftentimes people get stuck with those two things and they figure if they have enough women or enough people of a certain racial background that is over. No, it's much more than that. You have abilities, religion, gender orientation, sexual orientation, all of that to consider. Also, when we think about diversity, we know we're talking about just the quantitative piece. The inclusion and belonging is really the qualitative aspects of diversity. and what we're really striving for, that people from different backgrounds actually feel that they belong in the court setting, either as employees and court users or other respects. We readily admit up front there is no one size fits all type of plan when you're thinking about diversity and inclusion. You need to know what data is important to your court and what new resources you have and which ways to approach it. We've also found out diversity and inclusion is not a destination, it's definitely a journey. 2020 was the year of making diversity statements. We believe 2021 is the year putting action behind those statements. And that's what really we've worked towards as a court. Judge Bazzi?
And I'd like to add, I think as we all go into go on this journey, I think it can be a little overwhelming thinking that you have to come up with a plan. And I know I was overwhelmed when I first joined this committee, but as Zenell indicated, this is a journey and you don't have to solve everything immediately. It's going to take time, and we're going to talk a little bit about our process throughout the next hour, but it does take time. You start out by giving yourself some small goals, some small projects, and it ultimately is something that I know that you are going to be happy with, and it's going to be ever evolving. As you go along, you'll notice that it's going to change, but it's going to change in a way that fits you and your organization even better.
So just again, we shared these points here. For us, we got the court staff involved, our judges, the staff, the attorneys, court users, and the community.
We also We also worked with we really were looking at building public confidence and trust in the foundation of our judicial system and justice. We will share how we got there, why we did things a certain way, the lessons learned, and our next steps. You want to talk about this, Zenell?
Sure. So one of the very first things that we pointed out in the introduction and that we had to learn is what was diversity and how do you look at diversity in the workplace? And this chart was so helpful to us. There are internal dimensions of diversity where there's age, race, gender, sexual orientation, physical ability, and ethnicity. And pretty much those are visible to the outside world. And then the external ones are the sort of features that you, identities that you collect as you go along in life. Your marital status, your income, where you live, your parental status, educational background. And so those are not as fixed and actually can be changed. And then you look at the organization itself. Where do people fit in your organization? How is your organization run to sort of put people in different identities? Do you base things on seniority? Do you have various classifications? Is it based on content, your IT people versus your legal people? So that gives you one framework in which to think about diversity, and you can actually use this framework later when you're trying to figure out where do you want to start with diversity. Judge Bazzi?
I'd like to add, as you go along, a lot of people, as Zenell just indicated, there's so many different dimensions of diversity. And what I would put forward is I do believe many courts are actually practicing or putting into a practice projects that or goals or something that are diversity and inclusion that would fall underneath that umbrella. Things like, for ability, we have ramps that go into our courthouses to make sure that people are able to safely enter our courthouses. And so when, unfortunately, diversity is taking on a little bit of a political tone, but it really isn't political. Most courts are doing things that are diversity and inclusion. They might just not be recognized as diversity and inclusion. And so that's something to keep in mind as you're going along as well. And as Zenell just indicated, a couple examples of diversity are ability, background, geography, affinity. Are we continuing to hire the same people in the same positions with the same backgrounds? We want to make sure that as we're bringing people into our organizations, we're bringing people not only who are different physically and come from different backgrounds, but people who have different experiences. because people with different experiences have something valuable to bring to the table in terms of conversation as well. So we're going to go to some reflection questions. What are the major diversity and inclusion issues that your court needs to address, whether they be geographical, race, military? We come from a very diverse area. There's a very diverse population here. And so our diversity needs are going to be different than some urban area, some rural areas. And so you just have to look at your area and what are your diversity needs. There may not be a diverse racial makeup in your community, but there may be a diverse military makeup in your community. It's just something that you need to think about as you're going along. And who is impacted by these issues? Judges, staff, the attorneys, court partners, court users in the community, just something to think about. So now, why does diversity matter?
It matters because if you have just one thought present in your organization, there is no innovation, there is no creativity. When you're bringing different people of different backgrounds, different life experiences to the table, you get to leverage that. You get to have that innovation go on. And as courts, we're very traditional, very methodical. But if you bring, say, for instance, someone who's very millennial, generational wise, they can actually challenge the thoughts and move us further in the process. And we have some diversity that we already appreciate, like we know that we need technology, but we didn't realize how much we could actually leverage technology probably until the pandemic. So you have people on staff who can take you there. But if you had only one type of employee who came from one background, you would be missing out on so many of those opportunities. That's why diversity matters.
And I look at it a little bit differently. In addition to what Zenell just said, what we've seen over the past year is some issues related to how people view the justice system. And we really need to make sure there have been some cracks in its foundation, and our justice system works because people have faith in it. They believe in it. If people lose faith in our justice system, then what do our court orders begin to mean? What do our rulings begin? What value do our rulings have? And so it's important to keep that public confidence in our judicial system to make sure that people feel equally represented and equally heard and included within our courts.
Judge Bazzi, I would just add to that as well. As people are answering that question, they're really developing their business case for diversity. Why should your court invest time and energy in thinking about diversity and getting initiatives and plans off the ground?
And here we have some points of reflection, some of the things that we just mentioned and talked about. But the question becomes, what are your reasons? Why is diversity important to you? Why is diversity important to your court? Anything else you want to add, Zenell?
I would say that even if you look at the world at large, how we're becoming more globalized, look for some of that too to include into why diversity matters. Populations are shifting, immigration numbers are changing. We need to be aware of that as a court, if we're really talking about we want justice for all.
So now we're going to talk about how we got started. Zenell, you want to start this one?
Sure. So one of the things that was very key to us getting started, again, is understanding what diversity and inclusion is, and then looking at various sources to get data to see where did we fit in. We went for national data. So we wanted to look at what did the census say. We went for demographics regarding our community, who were in our jails, who was receiving services from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. What did juvenile justice statistics look like? Was any special group disproportionately impacted? We took that information in. We used our court surveys that we gave to the public. That was important. We pulled trial court reports. We used information that we got back from when we used the National Center Court tools about engagement with people. We had internal reports from our state court administrator's office that had grievances. We looked at that. And then we have this opportunity to have discussions to figure out how diverse, what do people think about our organizations? And we benefited from that. We had some training early on in our family divisions about diversity, and there were some assessments done. And then taking that information back and just looking at the data. What information is out there? What diversity dimensions are important to our court? What are our resources, and where do we get started?
And really think about what types of data do you have in your area? This is all the data that was available to us. Some of this may be available to you. You may have other data that's available. Sometimes local colleges or universities will keep statistics on the population makeup. And I would reach out to those organizations and see what, if anything, they have that's available to them. And you can certainly do your own assessment. I know we did a survey initially when we first got started, and the goal of our team is to continue to survey people as we go along as well. So there are so many different points of data that you can pull from, and just try to think out of the box and see what works, what could work for you. You want to talk about this, Zenell?
So we got the data. We also had to think about the people who is going to be on this team with us to make sure diversity and inclusion became a reality. We didn't want to just say, hey, give this to HR and our HR director would assume it. Number one, our HR director has more than enough things on her plate right now. And to give her something as big as diversity and inclusion would be burdensome, because we're not talking about doing something that's a one-time event. We were talking about actually changing our culture, that we began to think from that perspective. Are we diverse, and are we being inclusive? So we had a cross function team. We had HR as a representative. We have our general counsel. We have numerous administrators, whether they're from the family, juvenile, criminal, civil divisions. We have judges. We have line staff. We have a group of about 15 people. We wanted to make sure that we were actually hearing from everybody who could represent some segment of the court. Do you want to talk about the other pieces, Judge Bazzi?
Yeah, we had obviously we were really looking for diverse team membership, and so as we were going through, we were looking at making sure we had some racial and ethnic diversity, but also experience, different generations. We have a dual citizen, a person who's a Canadian and U.S. citizen that serves on our team. And we are lucky in that we have a huge court. And so we were able to really put together a diverse staff within our court complex. However, we recognize that other areas might not have that same ability. And so if that's the case, as you're trying to bring your team together, think about who are your partners, who do you work with? It could be the county, it could be the city. And really look at trying to not only bring people from different organizations, but also different ages, different genders, different backgrounds, different affinity. And we have myself, I'm the judicial leader of the group and an administrative leader. And it's really important to have a team that can come together, that it really feels strongly about this topic, because it is it is a process, and it's not necessarily the easiest process. However, it is a process that's doable, and to have people that you're working with that you have trust with makes it that much easier.
Judge Bazzi, I think your role as judicial champion was very important to our team. There's something about when the judge is talking to another judge, it almost seems like there's more credibility with that group, because it's one of their own presenting it to them. So I believe that a lot that you brought to the table was able to move it forward on the judicial side, to get the judges engaged, the judges buy-in.
Well, thank you, Zenell. And I have to give props to Zenell. I mean, the way that she was able to corral the team, the way she was able to bring insight and reflection to the questions, and her wealth of experience within this topic was incredibly helpful to the team. And so if you're able to draw on resources like that within your organization, it really does help. Do you want to talk about the diversity assessment?
So this is one example of an organizational diversity assessment. It's when the team or the entire court wants to look at how diverse, how well are we doing with diversity and inclusion? And it's almost like a written town hall where you're asking those who are participating to give you feedback. And you're going to use that feedback to start conversations. And then those conversations can then develop into specific goals and actions you want the court to take. Some of the questions: is the court intentionally promoting diversity and inclusion? Is it something that you're out in the forefront doing, that you've made it important and people can say, yes, strongly agree, all the way to strongly disagree? And then you want to have the conversations about that. If you strongly disagree, and that's one of the things that we as a court want to do, how could we do better with that? Is the court a place where people feel safe to be who they are? Again, that's a huge thing. You can be as diverse as you want to be, but if people are not feeling safe, they will show up with a mask on and they're not going to give you their true opinions or truly participate. They won't feel as if they're included and belong. Our chief judge recently shared some research he found that as far as high school reunions, about 20% of students return to reunions. And it's not because they moved away, but it's because most likely that 80% didn't have a very welcoming, belonging experience when they were in high school. We don't want that to be what it's like to be in the court. So that question there, definitely take it and have some conversation around it. If people do not feel like this is a place where they can be who they are and express their opinions freely. Also, does the court celebrate diversity? How do you celebrate it? For us, we started off with one simple thing. We just started publishing what's the various holidays and observations celebrated by diverse groups. Jewish American History Month, that was in May. Asian Pacific American History Month also was in May. And just learning about various cultures and sharing things. We got some interesting information that gave us more to learn about Cinco de Mayo, that is not just a drinking holiday. No, it's not Mexican Independence Day. What is it and why is it celebrated? And how can we be respectful and not just throw on sombreros and thinking that, oh, this is what it's about. So this assessment here is used to get to some issues and then have some dialogue, but definitely it has to be in an environment where people feel it's safe to have a frank conversation.
And this is another point of data. If you're doing this assessment, you can look at, and if you look at some trends, maybe that based on the answers that you're getting, and that might give you an understanding of, as you're going through your journey, what is it that you want to focus on first? Because you can't tackle everything at once. And so this is a great way to collect information to see where you should at least begin the process.
In addition to that, you may find out you need to use your public satisfaction surveys or possibly add some questions to your public satisfaction surveys to find out what the public's thoughts are about your organization as well. So organizational diversity, you want to make sure that you're assessing what's there. There's also other ways to assess what's prevalent regarding diversity as well. I'm sure you heard manage by walking. Well, you can also assess your diversity by walking through your courthouse. Look at your infrastructure. Is it where people who are in wheelchairs can easily navigate? Look at the art that you have on the wall. Does it depict a diverse community? Start looking at your signage. Start looking at the brochures that you're putting out. Judge Bazzi, some other ways?
I actually was speaking with a judge and they told me about how the artwork in their building, and their artwork was just very, kind of mid-century type artwork where there was a lot of kind of wars depicted. And while it was beautiful artwork, there were people being, with a knife at their chest or whatever it is, and you have victims of violence coming into these buildings. And, it's about stopping and taking a look at what you have in your area and your building. And is it really sending the appropriate message to the people who are coming in to your buildings? I'm not saying remove all that artwork, but just give it some thought. Is this really the most welcoming to the people who are entering in? Some of the other things you want to talk about, particularly now, is, are your practices during the pandemic inclusive? and what changes can be made to be more inclusive. We are fortunately getting to a point where we're starting to open up collectively as a country again. And there's certain things that have happened during this era with Zoom and remote hearings that have made accessibility to the courts so much better. But at the same time, there have been people who have such limited access to the internet, and having them come in through a remote proceeding has been a challenge. And so what are your practices? Is there a way to provide information to those people, maybe a public library, someplace that they can go to so that they can get access? So it's about thinking about, with every decision that is made, how is it affecting different groups of people based, depending on where they live, their geography, their background, their socioeconomic status. So it's about taking all that into consideration. Anything else with the slides, Zenell?
I think that's complete on that one. Definitely, you have to look to see what's important with your organization. And then once you look with your organization, definitely with the leaders, think about doing an individual inclusion assessment. And the assessment here is based off of, there's an article called the Competencies of the Inclusive Leader. And this assessment is based off of that. For me as a court administrator, this is what I look to. Do I make DNI a business priority? And I challenge the organizational practices that yield homogeneity. Do I do that? And how do I do that? Am I asking my HR director, well, where do we usually put our job postings? And maybe we should start putting them at the law schools, at the community colleges, and in diverse communities if we want more diversity in our candidates. Number two, I don't have all the answers. So I seek education and input from others on diversity and inclusion. One of the things that was very helpful for our team getting started was to have some outside assistance. I had recently completed the certification for diversity and inclusion and had a lot of, big ideas, but I also knew that I alone with my education could not get the whole team to just buy in and, share the various perspectives and aspects that they needed to know to buy in. So what we did is actually retain the services of another certified diversity professional. And she was able to address diversity in areas that I was not yet familiar with, also to provide more than my one perspective to the answers to the questions that we were faced with. I worked to identify my own biases and practices ways to prevent them from influencing my actions. Implicit bias is like the Diversity 101 course. We know that everyone has those biases, but we have to be willing to admit that and then to find ways where we can disrupt them so they do not influence our outcomes. And that sometimes is hard because as courts, we have a lot of traditions and a lot of things that have been in place for years and years. But am I willing to actually challenge myself to look to see, is there a different way, a more inclusive way about going about doing our business? I have to engage in active listening and respectful questioning as part of making decisions. Again, I just can't rely upon this is the way that we've always done things. I have to respect cultural norms of others. One of the ways that this has really been presenting itself in our court is with the LGBTQ community. Thinking about, where are the restrooms? Where is it, are we being appropriate, making sure that our forms identify how people want to be addressed in court proceedings. So being respectful means that I also have to have some cultural competency in the various cultures that we're dealing with, and also have some cultural humility. I don't know, I want you to teach me so I can learn about your culture. And finally, going back to that whole idea of psychological safety, our others, when they're talking to me, feel that it's okay to express their opinions, especially in group settings, to know that no one is going to be shut down or left out. These are the things that I have to assess my inclusion on, and I would offer it for other leaders to do as well.
And this information, as Zenell had indicated, there's some great works that she shared with our team, including 6 characteristics of inclusive leaders. And as she just indicated, 6 signature traits of inclusive leadership. These were great articles if you're interested in getting more information and learning more about it. And frankly, I've actually shared it with my husband, who's a leader within the corporate industry, and he found it incredibly helpful in his work as well. And so I highly recommend, if given the opportunity, you read these different articles. Getting started, identify and assess strengths and obstacles. I guess I'll start with this one, Zenell. It's important, as we indicated, we are a diverse area here. And so we had I guess, the fortune of having a chief that was very supportive of diversity and inclusion. And that has helped make our process that much easier. But we recognize that other jurisdictions, unfortunately, as I indicated, diversity has taken a little bit of a political tone, and it is a little bit more difficult. It's important to, as you're going along this process, reach out to in your community, whatever your group is, be it if you're going to be working with the county, the city, your local colleges or religious institutions, but look for leaders that you think that you can work with, leaders that are accepting of the idea of having a diversity and inclusion plan. That's incredibly important. If you're able to get leadership buy-in, that just makes your process that much easier. If you're not able to do that at the beginning, finding other people who are at least like-minded, or getting them to the table, eventually that buy-in will grow through natural conversation. And so don't be discouraged from it. It is, as we indicated from the beginning, and we're going to continue to say, this is a journey and this is a process. Zenell, you want to talk about the pool of resources?
So for training, you have like the National Diversity Council, who does an actual certification program. Cornell University has something out there. There's courses on Coursera. A lot of those are free. So there's a lot of resources when you think about education and training. Also, the local community colleges and universities, those are there as well. Put it in Google, things will come up, YouTube videos, TED Talks. There's a wealth of information there to fit every budget that you can possibly imagine. I would say the biggest thing is look to see what your strengths, your weaknesses are, and your resources, and get started. Start with what you have, start where you are. That's where your journey begins. That's your starting point.
Do we have a chat box function on this?
For that one, I'm not for sure. But even if we don't have a chat box, hopefully somebody chats to someone who's in the courtroom with them or sitting next to them. And just identify the obstacles that your court face, because you need to have that conversation for you to talk to someone. Here's what's going on. This is why I don't think we can do it, or I think this is the challenges that we'll face. Be very realistic about that. And those things shouldn't stop you, but being aware of them, you can then come up with strategies of how to face them. And everyone's challenges are different depending on budgets, people resources, community resources, leadership buy-in. And then once you identify it, at least you have an opportunity to also identify a strategy.
Some reflection questions. What data, info, or research do you have that supports the DNI issues that are major for your court? What leaders must buy in to move DNI forward in your court? And so, as we were talking about earlier, identifying your allies and leadership, you think about your organization. Once again, we are a big court. We're able to pull directly from our organization, but some people might need the CEO of the county. Some people might need their local sheriff. I mean, identify who your leaders are and start that conversation with them. And even if they're hesitant in the beginning, identify their friends, right? And get them, try to get them on board, because through organic conversation, it gets easier to grow the buy-in. What resources are available to you as you're going along? Just, start jotting that down, thinking about, and what are your specific obstacles? Anything you'd like to add here, Zenell?
Definitely, once you jot all this down, I would definitely encourage that you have someone to have this conversation with and see what their reflections are as well. And when two or more coming together, you probably get the synergy of probably about four people. Then you can start figuring out, okay, so what next? What next? And I think that's a very important question to keep in mind. So you've done this, what next? And don't get caught into where it's just a cerebral type of exercise. You got to put some feet to this type of thing. You got to put something in motion. Our very first thing was starting off with a diversity calendar. Very easy, didn't take much. Go to Google, go to Wikipedia, put that information out there. And then getting our team involved where every team member had a month that they were responsible for. Get started as soon as possible. Learn and do, learn and do.
So next we're going to go on to getting moving, how we began our action. And we're going to start off by talking about a DNI initiative versus a DNI plan. Zenell, if you want to start with this one.
So go back to the example. Like I said, we started off with, hey, we don't know what we're going to do, but let's put out there a diversity and inclusion calendar. Hey, we don't know what we're going to do, but we have a judge who's Hispanic and she does like a Hispanic month celebration in September, October. So let's, let the court lend some resources to that. And we were able to bring some art in. So those were initiatives very separate and just spur of the moment type of things. And definitely some of them require some financial backing as well. Then we moved to the point where we said, we want something that we know that's in place, almost like a calendar, and you can look forward and you know that this is going to occur or that is going to occur. And there's an infrastructure to it. So that's when we actually came with the DNI plan. What do we think was really important? So we took the diversity calendar and put that in as part of our DNI plan, but we have so many other things as well. We have the training. We broke it down to what do we need for judges to do? What do we need for staff? What do we need for court leaders to do? What do we need to make sure that the public is aware? What are we publishing? So there's various things that we're doing, various articles that we're putting into our legal newspaper, various outreach to high schools and law schools, colleges to have internships and all of that. So the DNI plan sort of brings individual initiatives all together and puts them forward in a structured format. It takes a lot of work to do. So I would say that if you don't have the resources yet to do a DNI plan, definitely go with DNI initiatives, but look to see what your resources are and how you can actually marshal them to make the most of the moment.
And with our DNI plan, it's important to, I guess, point out that we started working on it in 2018 and 2018, and we were supposed to take it to our leadership in 2020, and then COVID happened. And so really our plan wasn't formalized until the last few months. And so it's not as if you have to wait until you have a plan to begin your initiatives. While we were working on developing our plan, we were doing, as Zenell had indicated, the Diversity Month calendar. We had all our judges take the State Bar Pledge, the Diversity Pledge. And so you don't need a plan to do diversity and inclusion. A plan just helps formalize the process and make sure that you have, it provides a guide and a path in which to get to where you want to go in a more structured setting. But Zenell, I'd like you to talk briefly about a DNI plan makes things structured and it's great, but not everyone has the time or the resources to create a plan. What is a structured way in which they can work on DNI initiatives?
If we can go back to the diversity dimensions of diversity chart.
There it is.
Just think about it. If you want to say, okay, so we don't have an opportunity to do a full plan, take one of the dimensions. For instance, physical ability. Is your court meeting the needs of everyone regardless of abilities? And if not, what needs to happen? Is there something that needs to happen with the infrastructure, investing in some ramps? Is there something that needs to happen with the brochures or forms you're printing, that they're available in Braille or somebody's available to read if someone is sight impaired? You can take that and then you can be finished with that one for this year. Then next year, take another one. Think about maybe work experience. Are you allowing opportunities for internships for high school students? So you're building this pipeline type of thing. What about college students? Are they able to come in on the summers and work in your court? What about those who are in the court and already working? Do you give them an opportunity for professional development? And do you even include in that professional development opportunities to attend trainings that are based on diversity elements? There was one person who was going for a training in our court to maintain her psychology background, her licensure there. She was going to the American Psychology Conference, no issue. But when I got her document to go to the Black Psychologist Conference, it was like, I just want the days and I'm going to pay. So the question is, why do we pay for one thing instead of another? Do we pay for the ABA instead of the NBA? And why not pay for both? So looking for resources and thinking of ways of expanding it around that. Definitely those opportunities exist there. And it doesn't have to be a huge plan. Just take one of those topics and say, hey, we're going to work on this topic for the year or the next 6 months, and then move on to the next. That's probably one of the easiest ways if you don't have a plan. What are the dimensions of diversity most relevant to your court, and how do you get started working in those areas?
So you can treat this almost like a checking the box as you go around this. All right, let me head back to where we were. So we've talked a little bit about initiatives as well as the DNI plan. We want to share our mission and vision with all of you. Our mission, and I just want to talk a little bit, it took us quite some time to actually come to our mission. We had a group of 15 to 20 people, and everyone had an opinion about every word, and we listened to all those opinions because what they were saying was important. But the other things we also looked at was the mission of the court. DNI, as Zenell has indicated, we didn't want it to be a standalone thing that we were doing on the side. We wanted everything that we were doing within DNI to reflect the court itself. And so we looked at what was the mission of the court, and is our mission incorporating the court's entire, what we're doing as a court. We also, when we were looking at our vision, and we didn't think that we needed to reinvent the wheel, we looked at the state bar. What does the Michigan State Bar have as their vision when it came to diversity and inclusion? And so we looked there, and we took from their mission and vision as well and made it our own, kept the things that we thought were helpful to us, and took out some of the things that maybe just didn't relate to our organization. So as you're going through and thinking about what you want your mission or your vision statement is, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can look at what you have as a core with your organizations that you're affiliated with, such as the State Bar, your State Bar, and see how can you just kind of take from what they have to build something for your organization. Zenell, you want to talk a little bit about how we took this to leadership as well?
Sure. One of the things I found interesting too this weekend, you can actually Google like diversity statements, and there's like top 10 things you're supposed to make sure they have in them. And I checked ours against it. It's supposed to be brief, easily, at a lower reader level so everyone can understand it easily, and infused with positive words. I said, okay, so we did pretty good. When we wanted to share this with our chief judge, we gave it to him, and he's the one who made sure that we had the emphasis on military status. So he added that piece. Then we rolled it out to another group, a focus group of judges. What are your thoughts there? We also asked our team members to roll it out to various segments in their divisions as well. And so it was an opportunity to have all of the little groups sort of weigh in on what did they believe needed to be in there, what was important. And then we had an actual bench meeting where we had all the 58 judges there saying, hey, this is what our mission and our vision is, and expect to see more from us. You've already gotten a little taste of what the diversity calendars looked like. We've shared a little, about the various observations on the holiday celebrations that we were having. This is what our vision is. This is what our mission is, and we will be more prevalent throughout the court system. And conversation ensued around that. So we're continuously to roll this out. We now have the complete plan, and we will be rolling it out again to the judges, to the staff, and then to the community.
Right, getting moving action. As we've indicated, now we have our plan. And so how are we going to build consensus around the plan? And as Zenell just indicated, we have a plan. We've been talking about this since we began it in 2018, starting with that first bench meeting after our committee meeting where we had the judges sign on to our State Bar Diversity and Inclusion Pledge. But now our next step is to go to our executive team. You know, how do they want to see this plan rolled out? What kind of trainings do they believe would be most useful? Are they recognizing what we're doing and just kind of continuing to build on that? Because we recognize that we need leadership. If leadership has bought in, then people will continue to follow. And even if leadership hasn't bought in, then that might lead to a situation where people just don't have faith in the plan. And so that's a incredibly important component of this, identifying the players in the role. In our team, we included our human resources, as Zenell indicated. We included our general counsel. So that was really important. You want to talk a little bit about the legal community, Zenell?
Definitely. So our state bar has a diversity and inclusion action team. So they're definitely privy to what we're doing. We're sharing information. They're sharing events with us, and we're participating in those. Our state court administrator's office, we most recently shared with the judges and court leadership in Michigan about what our journey was on diversity and inclusion. Michigan Judicial Institute, you know, was a part of that effort as well. But looking for leaders, buy-in, information resources from like the National Judicial College. NACM just recently issued a diversity statement and pledge, so you want to look at that. And what about the local affinity bars and specialty bars? One of the most important things I think that our court has done came as a suggestion from the women lawyers. The women lawyers had met with me for coffee, and we were talking, and I said, well, what's your experience of the court? What things are challenging for you? And the president at that time pointed out a lot of their younger members were moms, newly moms, and that they were coming into the court and they needed to have a place where they could express. So we created lactation rooms for those mothers to have that private place where they could express. And then our chief judge at that time had to have the conversation and put it on the judicial agenda to remind the judges that there may be young mothers who may need to ask, hey, can we take a brief adjournment on the record so I can go ahead and use the lactation room. But that mother is not going to give all that detail, but just simply ask for, hey, can we take a break on the record? So to get the judges to understand that. So the affinity bars bring a lot of information that we, as far as court users, just going through our buildings can just overlook. And then there's the community. What are the local colleges, the religious institutions, and community organizations? What's their field? What do they think the court needs to do to make sure that they're being inclusive? Sometimes it's probably coming out to one of their events and providing information about court programs and resources. Judge Bazzi?
You know, I was asked this question, why should the court take the lead? And it's because by nature of what we do, we are leaders. Our judges are leaders by virtue of their title. Our courts are leaders because of what we do. And so if we begin this process, you have a certain credibility that you just get. We are lucky in that regard. And so we can give this project that credibility, and people will come on board. And as I indicated before, we need to make sure that there is continued faith in our justice system, because that is how it will continue to work in the manner that we've grown accustomed to it working. It's also important to just keep in mind that consistency is key. As Zenell indicated at the very beginning of this presentation, that in 2020, that was the year of statements. Everyone had a diversity and inclusion statement, but people get busy, time goes on, and then what next? There are a number, diversity isn't new, it's been around for quite some time, but a lot of diversity initiatives have failed because they were a statement, there was the feel-good moment surrounding the statement, and then it ended. Having a plan, the great part about having a plan is it keeps you on task. Even during COVID, when we couldn't physically meet, we continued our virtual meetings. We continued our small, what are we doing for this project? What do we want to work on next? Do we want to do a survey? Things like that. It's important to keep the conversation going so it's not, so it just doesn't get forgotten, because we are all very busy. And so it is easy to set it on the back burner and go to something that is just has more urgency in it. Anything you'd like to add, Zenell?
I think also with the plan, we have the benefit that even if we change leadership, there's something there that's concrete and memorialized for the new leader to pick up and to start and pick up on that pace too. So it doesn't die when there's a change in leadership. It doesn't make a difference if Judge Bazzi's not there or I'm not there, somebody can still carry the torch forward. Doesn't make a difference who the chief judge is. So I think the plan is one of the great ways to make sure that it does become consistent and that it does become embedded in your culture.
So getting moving, lessons learned. Time and money may dictate whether initiatives or a plan is more appropriate for your court. Once again, I know we've indicated we've been very lucky in that we have a plan, we had the resources. However, if you don't have the resources to create a plan, there was the chart that Zenell indicated earlier, the dimensions of diversity that you can use in lieu of a plan. Consistency is key. Identify what is relevant now for your court, looking at the data and the surveys that you are giving. Zenell, you want to continue with this?
And my thing is, don't just learn about diversity and inclusion. There is so much you can learn. There's probably enough to take you for a 4-year degree. You need to learn, and whatever you learn, whatever that principle is, start putting it into action. So don't stop with the learning. Don't let the learning, be the reason that you're not doing anything right now in the moment. The value of DI professionals. For us, like I said, the DI professional was able to answer questions that I may not have had the answer to yet, also to provide a different perspective when that was needed. And that person's full-time job is to stay on top of what's going on in diversity and inclusion and equity. That's not my full-time job. So that person also brings up-to-date, relevant information. There are going to be uncomfortable conversations in the room when you're talking about diversity and inclusion. And it may be the topic is sensitive, but it may just be that it's just new and no one has ever thought about how to language certain things. And to become comfortable with people not readily able to get their thoughts and formalize them into words will become the norm. And you got to get creative with yourself. There are different reasons that different people buy into diversity and inclusion. Figure out what's all those reasons and which ones are important to your court and which ones are important to your community. Judge Bazzi?
I would add some of the things that I learned. We are a bench that has approximately 60 judges. I'm just one of them. And what I realized at some point is I wanted some more judges on board. So we've actually gotten 2 more judges to join our committee, because once again, coming into get creative with yourself, if I have more people selling, then I have more people buying. And then we've also talked about, as we develop trainings, offering lunch. Can we offer lunch, in a virtual setting? Pulling people from different parts of our bench on panel discussions. So, because then maybe their friends will come along, the people that they associate with and they talk to. And the one thing I'd like to point out is they are uncomfortable conversations. I think we don't want to offend each other. We all want to be nice. But when you set up your team, I think have a conversation with each other. Like, we know this is going to be uncomfortable, but this should be a safe space for people to be able to ask questions because they want to learn. If we don't ask questions that are uncomfortable, then we aren't going to learn anything. And so that is important. I know I've been uncomfortable in conversations, and I've been uncomfortable when I've been challenged on some of the things that people have said to me, but I've also grown from it too. And I've changed things that I've done in my courtroom to make sure that I'm more inclusive of the people that are coming into my courtroom and appearing before me. I would say, but have that trust conversation and don't repeat what is being talked about in your meetings. It's important to keep that trust, because as soon as that trust is broken, then people aren't going to want to have these conversations, and it will hurt your efforts and your plan. So some reflection questions. Would a DNI vision or commitment statement be valuable to your court? What is a meaningful starting action that you can undertake in your court to move DNI forward? As we indicated, actually one of the first things we did was our pledge by the judges, and then followed by our calendar, which has actually been very positively received by our court. Whose help do you need? What available tools can you use? And what specific, measurable, actionable, realistic DNI goal can you set for 2021? As I indicated earlier, we've been working on this for 3 years. You're not going to solve everything at once. That first year, it was that pledge, and it was the diversity and inclusion calendar, and it was working on the plan. And so this is a slow process, but it is a process that we're moving forward on, and we're getting a lot of great positive feedback from. Would you like to add anything, Zenell?
I would just highlight what you said. It's not something that you'll quickly go in and fix. It's not that type of issue. It's complex, it's layered, it's going to take time, and it's going to take your resources, other resources inside the court and external.
You want to talk about our current status?
So our mission and vision has been adopted. We also have pointed out that our final draft of the plan is going to the executive committee probably this month or early next month. And the executive committee is a group of judges as well as a group of administrators, again, to see, did we miss anything? And for a person who likes to get things done, you know, all of this review and everything like that is sort of like, okay, let's get past it already. But you can't. You got to actually take the time and listen and pay attention to what people are saying. So we are finalizing the plan. We're working on projects in the process. We know what the key components are. Like I said, we're looking at what is it that we want from leadership? What is it that we want from staff? What is it that we want from our judges? And what are we giving to the public? We want to make sure that we have training as a key component. We want to make sure that there's things going on in our HR, our hiring process as key components. So those are being highlighted as well. Our team continues to meet monthly. We have gone from in-person monthly meetings where we had fabulous lunches to virtual meetings where we'll bring our coffee and water. And we also talked about the pandemic effect and how we were able to survive that because there was a plan there and it was easy to pick up. Educational awareness and training is underway. We've done one training so far with judges and staff on multi-generational workplaces. How do we communicate better with each other and work better with each other? And again, we intend to roll out our finalized plan in the coming weeks, and very excited about that.
And as you are doing the trainings, what we've learned, we've taken what we've learned from our first training and we're adapting our second training. So I would say as you're kind of deciding what trainings you want to do, go with something a little bit easier, a little bit, because there are going to be some learning curves as you're going along. We want to make sure that the information we're giving people is useful and informative, but we want to make sure people show up to hear it. And so I would say start with something a little bit easier so you can learn from it, and then maybe tackle those more difficult topics as you go along once you've learned a little bit and can incorporate what you've learned. For those of you also who might come from jurisdictions who don't have the training budget we do, pooling resources. How can you work with your local county, your city, or with the neighboring judicial district? And maybe you both have a resource that would be that you could both use. Could you pull those resources together, maybe pay a smaller fee? And in the virtual world, we're able to do this. You know, we can all be in the same place. It doesn't matter where in the world we are. And so that is a great opportunity to pull resources together and work with each other on some of the initiatives that you may have. Our next steps, we intend, as I indicated, to continue with our education and training. The learning will be ongoing. We also want to continue to survey people, make sure, are they getting the information that we've been sending out. Recruitment retention is being reviewed. We want to make sure we're attracting diverse candidates. We're creating pipelines within our organization. One of the things I know that we've talked about is clerks tend to be women most of the time. And is it because of the way that we are advertising those positions? Is it making men feel excluded? So these are some of the things that we are thinking about. I know, Zenell, you have a little bit more experience in this area. Is there anything you think might be helpful?
So with the pipelines, definitely we have a high school program. We only take 18-year-olds, but we do actually have high school seniors who come in and work into the court. This year's been virtual. We are doing internships, summer internships for law clerks, for our judges. And then we're also going to the bar to help them or ask them to help us get our job postings out so their members know that we're there, that we're actually hiring. But not just having this conversation about get our job postings out, but letting them know why the court is a good employer. Why should someone be thinking about a career in the court? And also in that conversation, asking how we can be supportive of the bar. With the leadership accountability role, our HR department is going to take our job descriptions, especially the ones in leadership, and embed in their responsibilities that include being ambassadors almost for like diversity and inclusion in the community and making sure that inclusion counts within their departments. We'll be developing matrices to track outcomes. So what were the number of diverse candidates who applied? What were the number that made it to the interview cycle? And then if we see that, say, for instance, that there's a drop off between the application to passing an exam for employment, possibly putting some tools out there and preparing people more to pass those exams. We'll continue to review data and surveys and challenge ourselves to become more comfortable with being uncomfortable and expanding our community outreach and awareness. And we want to help other courts and we want to help our legal community. We're very aware of what the court looks like and how the court needs to diverse in our state and also nationally. And we want to be a part of those conversations, sharing what we did in our court to help improve things and also looking at other ways that we can help others.
One of the current things we're working on right now is as we are working with, we have so many different organizations in our area, and we tend to work with and volunteer at places that we know, we're comfortable with, we have a familiarity with them. And so one of the next steps we want to do is, all right, what are the different organizations that the different judges are connected to? Are we leaving somebody out? Is there an organization out there that does not have a connection to the court? I think there are so many different places we can go, but if you continuously go to the same organizations, you're telling the other organizations that they don't have a special status. It's not explicit. Certainly you don't mean to say that, but it's sometimes implicitly understood that way. And so it's about being very intentional about making sure that we are not leaving anyone out of that connection. And that as we do that, people become more comfortable seeing us in the different organizations. The court people become more comfortable. And again, it increases that trust in our judicial system.
One of the things I think is pretty important too, Judge Bazzi, is that we as a court are learning about our diversity more and putting that out there on social media that, you know, What's the background of our judges? We know that we didn't have our first woman judge to 1941. What's her story? So putting that story out there so it can be shared. Our first Jewish judge, Judge Kuyten, came in 1951. Our first African-American judge was in the 1950s. What's the history that we want to put out there? And is it recorded somewhere? So being willing to do that and to showcase it for the public, and then even asking some of our current judges about their backgrounds, and are they willing to share what that background and experience means to them. And it gives the opportunity for those who are aspiring to be judges to see themselves, hey, there's a judge who's from an Arab American background, an Arab American woman, a Jewish woman, an African American woman, an African American man. And people are able then to, the community is able to see role models. And again, that not only builds the current confidence and trust, it also builds the inspiration for numerous generations to come after those who are currently on the bench. So it's been pretty fun doing that too.
And I do want to say Zenell has been great, and she's been very active on the different social media platforms, making sure it's on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and all of those different resources. So we're sharing this so the public, even if we don't have public initiatives, the public is seeing what we are doing. And so sharing that information with your legal news and all these different platforms has been incredibly helpful. I believe that is our last slide.
So we always close with the saying that justice is what love looks like in public, from Dr. Cornell West.
So Judge Bazzi, Zenell, thank you for an excellent program today. For those of you watching, we'd like to thank you for viewing this program. And remember, if you have any questions or desire additional information, you will have the ability to contact the presenters directly. All right, it's a wrap.
Thank you.